I'm a regular guest host, as you mentioned, on Coast to Coast AM, and that's like 600 affiliates across the United States. Fill in occasionally for George Noory on a Friday, and then I do some Saturdays and Sundays, coasttocoastam.com. And then I have a podcast called Strange Planet, which is kind of the same fare as we discuss on Coast to Coast. UFOs, conspiracies, alternative everything, alternative energy, alternative health, spirituality, the occult, you name it. That's it right there, Strange Planet. And you can subscribe to my podcast. It drops 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You can also subscribe to a newsletter there. It's called Inner Sanctum. Comes out once a month. It's absolutely free. And I also, you can also check it out on YouTube and Rumble. It's everywhere. And then I have a daily, because I'm not busy enough, I have a daily radio show on terrestrial radio in Toronto. It's the radio station Saga 960. And that's very different. It's quite a departure from the stuff I talk about on Coast and Strange Planet. It's more sort of news, the culture war. I talk about the cult of climate change. I talk about, news of the day. I talk, with politicians and different newsmakers and journalists and so forth. And it's a 2-hour show. I really need like a 5-hour show to discuss everything, but it's the Richard Syrett Show. That's on terrestrial radio. It's also available as a podcast. You can find the Richard Syrett Show everywhere where you find your podcasts, the website, therichardsyrettshow.com, and also a YouTube channel for the Richard Syrett Show where we post some of my monologues. And that's at Richard Syrett 64. Which may or may not be the year of my birth.
All of those links will be below in the description. Real quick, we are live from the Wise Wolf Gold and Silver Studios. That's right. Go to samtripoli.gold. Use the promo code TIMFALL. Get in the Precious Metals game for as little as $50 a month. I'm very excited that you're on. And, being on your show is a blessing. It's very interesting. I hadn't listened to Art Bell very much when I was young. Maybe heard it, something here, a clip here and there. I'm obviously before YouTube and all that stuff. But I do the show, and I just the show started off with a guy named Eddie Bravo. He was the first episode, and I just wanted to let Eddie talk. I didn't want to judge him. He would always go on JRE and just get tag teamed by those three guys who are now 2 out of the 3. Brian Callen's, we're still dragging him along, but they're all conspiracy theorists now. But back then, Eddie was going 1 on 3. So I'm like, I want to do a conspiracy podcast. One of my very good friends is like one of the big guys. Let's have him on. I'm just gonna let him talk. So I did that, and then people always be like, "Oh man, the show reminds me a lot of Art Bell and all that stuff," which I took as a giant compliment. And then I started listening to some of Art Bell, and I totally got what he was doing, because I would feel like Art, no matter how crazy the call was, he would let you go. And whatever you got to say in that time period that you're on the show, we're going to take it as facts. And I always was very impressed with that. Did you listen to Art early on in your life? How did you come on to Coast? How did you get into conspiracies?
I listened to Art Bell faithfully in the starting around the early to mid 90s. In fact, my future bride, we discovered later that this is something we had in common. So I was listening to Coast every night, hanging on every word Art said. And she was doing the same thing in her town. And anyway, that was kind of a commonality that we found out what we had. And then at that same time, I was behind the scenes producing talk radio in Toronto. And they had a great program where they would promote talent from within. So I was given a weekend show in 2000. And at first I was trying to figure out, what am I going to talk about? And I really didn't know what I was doing. And it was failing miserably. And then we used to get a subscription to something called the Wireless Flash. It came in the mail once a week or a couple of times a week, and it had guest suggestions, people that you could book, and the name of the producer was right there. They made it very easy. And there was some guy that was hunting the Loch Ness Monster. And I thought, okay, I'll try this. And I had this person on, and it was just like the lines were going crazy on the phones. And this was, again, early 2000. And that just sort of changed the trajectory of the show. I thought, well, maybe I should be doing more of this. And it just gradually took over. And then a year later, of course, with 9/11, that took over the show entirely. And every Sunday, that's all I talked about was 9/11. I think I was probably one of the first people on the radio in Canada, and maybe in the mainstream media in Canada, sort of pulling at a lot of those crazy, loose threads. Like, hey, why did they find this passport at the foot of the World Trade Center towers? It's in pristine condition. And this is the hijacker. This is the guy. How does that happen? Meanwhile, everyone else was maybe understandably sort of rally around the flag and let's get into Afghanistan and kill those bastards. I was just, wait a minute. There's some crazy shit happening here nobody's talking about. And that took over the show.
Wow.
And then, Coast to Coast was my wife's, I call her the mighty Aphrodite, my lovely Greek wife. She found out that the vice president at Premier Radio Networks, which owned Coast, and they also had the Rush Limbaugh show and all that. She found out that the vice president of Talk at Premier was from Montreal, so a fellow Canuck. And she said, let's send him a package, and maybe you can get on as a guest host. And I thought, oh, that's crazy. Who the hell am I? A couple weeks later, I got a phone call from this guy. George Noory is taking his daughter out for birthday dinner on next Friday. Would you like to fill in for him? It's like, whoa. It's like I felt like I'd been, riding the buses and the minors for my career up until that point. This was 2009, and now I get a call up for the Yankees. So, I was walking on air. So I did one show in 2009. Didn't hit it out of the park. It was a serviceable 4 hours of radio, I thought, for my first time. Didn't get a call back for 5 years. And then the executive producer, Lisa Lyon, called me in 2014, January. I remember it. Just driving up Bayview Avenue here in Thornhill, called and said, how would you like to do sort of a regular weekend gig on Coast? And I've been doing that for the last 11 years. And it's such an honor. It has such a legacy and such a reach. It's an amazing platform, reaching millions of people every night. I just love it.
Well, it's a blessing, and you're really great at it. Do you think you were predestined to do radio with your voice? Like, could you see you doing anything else with such a beautiful radio voice you have? And by the way, you have a face for TV too. Mostly they say,
well, I don't know about that.
Come on, buddy. You're a good looking man. Well,
thank you. The voice, I don't know. Maybe I'm alone with my voice too often or too much time. Sometimes I get sick of my voice. I sound like Tom Waits after eating sandpaper or something. But I guess some people find it not that objectionable. So it served me well. No, going through high school, I just grew up watching the Tonight Show, or actually listening to the Tonight Show through my parents' bedroom door. I had the bedroom next to theirs. And, I was supposed to be in bed by that time, but I listened and I fell asleep listening to Johnny Carson. That was my childhood. So, and I remember getting my first transistor radio, little red transistor radio, and listening to the 75 and 76 World Series, my Cincinnati Reds, on that transistor radio. So I guess I always had, as far back as I can remember, a love for the medium. Radio more than television. It was always more like romantic than television. So I guess in a sense, somewhere deep inside my soul, I don't know if I would use the word destined, but I think I chose correctly.
Well, I think you did too, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're a wonderful interviewer, and I'm glad you're on the show, and we're blessed.